everybody. Welcome into yet another edition of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein. Alongside me is a man who is so legendary, he might shave his head. The great Ben McDonald. Ben, how's it going, man?
Bringing our pre-show discussions in here, just the merits of becoming an old man and decisions to be made down the road. Who knows? We found a new nickname. You're now Jason Big Papa Goldstein, which I think might stick. Otherwise, my friend, I'm staying safe. Flo and I are healthy, and that's about as much as you can hope for. How about you?
Yeah, we're well as well. My mom, who had COVID with me, got tested again last week, and thank God is negative. So we're just trying to stay safe as well. I guess that's where we're going right now, on this particular episode. Summer's here, and people are sick of staying home. And I think a combination of that and the protests, there are spikes all over the country. You don't have to listen to us to receive that news. And I'm just of the opinion now that I don't know what to make of the NBA coming back. But first and foremost, Ben and I just want to wish everyone their health and safety first and foremost as we battle this. I don't know if you want to call it 1A or wave 2 of COVID-19, but it's back. 2-3 weeks we talked about race and social justice issues, and now we're back to COVID. I said it's going to be flip-flopping now. COVID's going to die down. Protests are going to ramp up. So I don't really know where we are as far as the NBA is coming back. The cases are coming in hot and heavy. Teams were back in market at their facilities, and a bunch of players are now positive for COVID-19. Just to run this list down, we covered Nikola Jokic last week, Alex Len, Malcolm Brogdon, Jabari Parker, 3 unnamed members of the New Orleans Pelicans, and then you have DeAndre Jordan and Spencer Dinwiddie of the Brooklyn Nets. You mentioned to me earlier this week, Ben, the Nuggets closed their facility, citing concerns about the virus. Their head coach, Mike Malone, had the virus. The Nets just reopened theirs. It was closed for several days. Some NBA staff members are telling GMs that they're uncomfortable with going to Florida. Hearing all that, as much as we want to see basketball, as much as we are hoping for it, we miss it, we need it, is now the time for it, is my question. And I know you and I talked before the show, and you think that there's reasons for them to continue playing and to go through with this. But with all the spikes, in Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, Nevada, Tennessee, a lot of the major markets, how are you going to get over, I want to say, 900 people down there, right? If your traveling party is, 700 people. If your traveling party is 35, and 22 teams, it's over 700 people. How are you going to get 700 people, out more people getting? Between the opt-outs and the players that are tested positive now, and they may not be able to play. Ben, what is the point?
So, I think you raised some good questions ultimately here of where we're going. For you, it sounds like what your concern is that this isn't worth the risk, right? That going down there is not worth the risk to the players. And, I think you said something before when we were talking about this before the show that I want you to talk about a little bit more, which is that you mentioned that it's bigger than basketball. What do you mean by that?
To me, Ben, this is bigger than basketball because you and I are currently living through 2 of the biggest historical events the world will see or has seen in a very long time. We have the coronavirus pandemic. We have the Black Lives Matter movement, the call for social justice, people fighting for equality. We have the case against police brutality. It's like basketball coming in and just a bunch of, people sitting around watching TV, watching games. It just doesn't feel like the time. I hate to say it, and I tweeted this out the other day, I don't think we could see sports until we get a vaccine for this thing. It just doesn't feel safe. And look, you know how big of a basketball fan I am, right? We've been sitting here yearning for it. We are over 4 months without it, and we are keeping the show going and doing the best that we can. All media outlets doing the best they can to find things to talk about. But when all the news that's coming out is this player's sick, this player opted out, this player doesn't want to go, this player's scared, these staffers are scared. Because remember, you have to have chefs down there, security, trainers, team doctors, coaches. There are a lot of moving parts that we just take for granted, right? The NBA teams, they hire a lot of staffers, right? Nothing but the best for the players in the NBA, and deservedly so. But because of that fact, it's going to be really hard to get teams down there close to full strength. I mean, the Raptors have been in Florida for a couple days already. You know, they're down in Fort Myers practicing at Florida Gulf Coast University. They may have done it right because they're in Florida in quarantine already. But there are 20 other teams, or 19 if you exclude the Heat and the Magic, that don't have that luxury. Look at a guy like DeAndre Jordan had to fly across the country from his home in Southern California to get back to Brooklyn and got the coronavirus. And DeAndre Jordan has a history of asthma, pneumonia. He can't go down there even if he wanted to. This is just a disease that is completely unprecedented. And I know you and I have talked about, you know, last week, the week before, about social justice and how players are going to want to march on Washington. Now, players got to be worried about their own health, let alone what's going on in the world. It's just a scary time. And I'll keep saying this. I want it to happen. I just don't think it's a good idea. I'm not going to sit here and pout if they do make it down there, because once they're in the bubble, great, let's play ball. But the odds just seem to be stacked up against the NBA right now. And I'm trying to drive that home. I'm trying to be sensible. You know, if we were doing the show and we were 8, 9 years younger and didn't understand the severity of what's going on, we'd be there saying, oh, get down there. Whoever's going to play. Yeah. But now it just seems pointless. And I know you think it's a money thing, right? Everyone needs to get paid. It's a business, which it is, and I know the money is huge. Yeah. But is it really worth the risk when we will never see another era like this? The fact that we had a pandemic, George Floyd's murder, everything that has happened in the span of 4 months, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, how much of this, too, do you attribute to the situation that's going on in these places? So if this was, let's say these games were in Montana and there were less than 50 cases in Montana and they happen to have a resort, would that change it for you? Like, is some of this the way that the U.S. has been able to respond? Because we've seen sports in other countries. So, you know, you take South Korea, for instance. They've been able to play baseball with no issue, and they've been able to control their cases. Taiwan has been able to control their cases. Japan has been able to control their cases. Germany, you have the Bundesliga already playing major sports. Now the English Premier League has even started. They're starting to get a handle on their cases there. You know, we're seeing sports resume in all these countries. How much of this concern that you have comes from the fact that the U.S. continues to have cases? They had their highest cases of the entire pandemic just recently, last week. And those cases continue to rise. And we're watching Florida, Texas, California, Arizona. We're watching those cases explode. I mean, how much of that plays into your concern with this?
A lot of it does. You know, if it was in Montana, I'd be concerned because of the spikes in the country. I know Montana is not the most heavily populated state. I don't even think there's a facility in the state that can even hold the NBA. You know, the NBA went to Orlando because of the Disney Wide World of Sports that's there, the luxury hotels, the fact that it's secluded, even though there will be guests in the park for now, because I do see theme parks and things of that ilk shutting down again. I just think the NBA needs to pull the plug. It is not worth the risk. You know, if there weren't cases in Florida, then I would say, you know, put these players on a for every get them into the bubble.
Just get them in the bubble.
In the week up, it's against the NBA's favor. I mean, Adam Silver talked to Time 100 Talks, and with the coronavirus cases on the rise in the United States and some teams having to close their facilities, the Nets, the Nuggets, Silver said he's confident about the NBA's plan to safely resume play, but admitted that a spread in the NBA community could bring the league to a halt again. Guess what, Ben? There's a spread in the NBA community. I know they did testing last week. 302 players got tested. Only 16 were positive, and we're starting to get, you know, names leaked. But, I mean, what if this coming Friday they test again and the number doubles? Then you have 10% of the NBA sick with coronavirus. At what point does that number get high enough for them to just say, no, this shouldn't happen?
Right. I mean, I think it's a really tough question. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is the way that we're watching the spread of all of this stuff and how interconnected it all is, because the way the United States in particular has responded to the coronavirus, particularly when you compare it to other countries, is having a major impact on the ability of sports leagues to resume play. And you said it, it's not going to be just the NBA. It's going to be all the other leagues. Now, baseball has talked about playing games without fans in home markets. If you think the NBA plan is dubious, the baseball plan is 100 times worse, because you're looking at a league that's going to say there's no quarantine, you're doing whatever you're doing, and then you're showing up to the ballpark, and you just have to hope that all the other players, all the other staffers have just done what they're supposed to. Like, if you think the basketball one's crazy, that's insane. I mean, if the NBA is having issues with this, imagine that. And then you have to fly people in from other cities where they may now have a giant spike. So the Marlins come, and you just have to hope that the Marlins don't, none of those players are sick, and you don't really know. I mean, they're going to get tested on game day, I guess. I mean, that to me is even more concerning. I mean, obviously the NHL doesn't even really have a plan. We don't know what's going on with the NFL, but I think you're right in the sense that the way that the national response has been, and frankly, the lack of a response, the inability of the federal government and the local governments in many cases to really do a good job with this has played a major role. And normally this is a show where we don't really get into politics, but I mean, I think you're watching it, that a lot of these leagues are getting quite critical of the handling by the president and others because of the fact that it's impairing the ability to do this. I mean, would you feel better if this was Germany, for instance, where their cases have gone down to almost nothing, or this was Korea? Do you feel like those countries also shouldn't have this, or because
No.
they've gotten a much better handle,
Yes.
you feel like it's okay?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even 2 weeks ago when the country was in a much better place, how excited you and I were for the NBA restart. And look, Ben, I don't like to get into politics either, but it's not the president's fault. It's not the state governor's fault that people don't know how to stay home, wear a mask in public. You see all these people partying on beaches, partying in pools, outside in the streets. That's a recipe for a disaster. And until there's a vaccine, if people can't control themselves, there's going to be no way to lead semi-normal lives. The NBA is a luxury. I know for many people it's a job, and there are so many people that go into making the league what it is, from the league office to the team staff to the players to the developmental aspects to the announcers to the arena staff to the doctors, trainers. There's so much that goes into it. It is a huge boost to the economy. But, Ben, right now it is not safe to play. I'd feel completely different if this were a week or two ago, or if we were in a place where cases were low, like in Germany. So, yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say, I do think some of this lays at the feet of leadership, but we don't need to get into all that right now. I think the bottom line is that ultimately you're right. There is a crisis that's going on, and it's sad, but the fact that individuals and the leadership have not been able to get this under control, put together a plan to solve it, it could become something. I mean, even Adam Silver is acknowledging this. It could be a situation where they don't do it. And as you're talking to me, I mean, I have to admit, there's a part of me that is really moved. I don't think, regardless of what they should do, and hearing you say this, I have to say I'm kind of inclined to agree with you that I'm feeling more and more like maybe they shouldn't do this. I think the reality is that they will. And I do think that boils down to the fact that, these guys want to play basketball. The owners want to have games. The television networks want to have games on TV that they can get eyeballs on and get advertising for. The advertisers want to have somewhere to get their revenue. And money makes the world go round. And so I think we're going to see this go. I mean, I'm happy that Adam Silver is saying things like we're not going to go full steam ahead no matter what. I'm glad that there's some reservations about this. I'm still going to say one thing, Jason, which is that I